Okay. So this is entitled Inspector More Than Just a Mouthpiece, because, well, for obvious reasons, first of all, it's about the inspector as a character in Inspector Calls. Somebody who I don't think will necessarily ever come up as a character, but has come up before as part of a theme. And you certainly could use this and be talking about him and what he represents somewhere else. I don't think he's ever going to use a character, partially because he's not necessarily always seen that way. Also because I think you have to remember about this exam is it has to be accessible to grade 1 as well as grade 9. It's quite a complex character. Now, the reason I've called it More Than Just a Mouthpiece is because you trawl around the internet and go to various places that want to tell you their theories about Inspector Calls all the way through. One of the things that will often come up is people say, yes, the inspector, he is a mouthpiece for Priestley. Okay, that's what he is. And I think, and I see it an awful lot, as you probably know, I'm a lead marker for this exam, and I see a lot of times people refer to him as that. He's Priestley's mouthpiece. I'm not sure I tend to agree. I definitely think that he is one of he has more to him than that. And I think if you're looking at a mouthpiece, okay, you may even be looking elsewhere and maybe looking at Sheila. So what this is arguing for you today is that there is more to him. There is more to the inspector than just pushing out Priestley's views to us. Okay. So I'm going to start with a section in which he's introduced to the audience, right at the beginning, when he first enters. And think about what can we pick up from that? Well, first of all, his experience described as being particularly experienced in certain ways, and his respect as well. Remember at the beginning, he refers to Burling as Sir. Okay, he's quite polite and quite respectful to him. He doesn't sit there and immediately take against him. He shows respect, not respect based on, as I think I've said before, not respect based on class, okay, not because they are high class, but purely because that's what you do when you come into somebody new. And that experience and respect kind of juxtaposed with what we hear from Burling at that point. Okay, they juxtapose with what we hear from Burling at that point. So we see him immediately as very different. As I said there, we have no consideration, though, from him at all of anybody's social position or anybody's expectations or expectations of anybody. Okay, he purely deals with people on the fact that they are human and you are human. Okay, nothing more beyond that, despite the fact that Burling tries to push that upon him very quickly by giving all of that list of all the posts that he's held, okay, and the fact that he still is important in the town. So I think to myself, what is he trying to get across to us? If we're seeing somebody who is experienced, who is respectful, but most importantly, not based on prior judgments due to social position, what are we meant to make of the inspector before he's even told us about Eva Smith? There's my thought for you. I think we all accept that Priestley wrote this play because he wanted change, okay? Although I'd probably argue that the change had already come and he was aware of that. He was really trying to make sure that change stayed. But this behaviour, this appearance of the inspector, to me, it is almost a vision of the new Britain that he wants. Respectful, based on, what you know. You do what you know, and you understand what you know. And social position means nothing. Okay? I think we're presented with a world in which it'd love to have a country of inspectors, or inspector characters anyway. Now, if we then take it a bit further on and think about him during the play again, one of the reasons he's more than a mouthpiece to me is he has a distinct character. There are certain elements of behaviour. There are certain elements of behaviour that we can pick up from him all the way through. First of all, it's worth noting that from what I just said at the beginning, the Burlings do cause a change. By the end of the play, he is no longer being respectful to them at all, and he gradually loses respect for them as he goes through. He's certainly not calling Arthur Burling Sir by the end. Okay, in fact, one of the last things he calls him is man, isn't it? No, don't stammer and yammer at me, man. I'm losing all respect for you people. And that change, as he goes through, does mean that he kind of takes even more authority over them because of the lack of respect for them. Again, you've got the references for all of these on the sheet that I've given, but and if anyone's watching this afterwards, the sheet will come up at the end. But he's very dismissive of their family relationships, even with Sheila and Erin. Any time they break off into any kind of argument, he doesn't give it very long before he says, basically, be quiet, deal with this later. I'm not interested. You can, I think he's one of the terms you can reset your family relationships later on when I'm gone. He has no interest at all in the family unit, only in interrelations. That's quite an interesting thing straight away. For Priestley to choose the family as the centre and then have this character who comes in, he shows no real interest at all in family. In fact, almost the family of man, if you like it. Seems to be more of his edge. And his interrogation style, and he works with them. Interrogation's an odd word, really, because he almost doesn't interrogate them. But when he goes to them, he's provocative, almost aggressive. Again, you have examples there in front of you where he will cut across people, particularly Arthur, but also Sybil and Gerald a bit. He'll cut them down right in the middle of speaking if they're talking, as Arthur tends to, far too much. He'll push them. He'll attack them. Not unpleasantly, but he will. And we can see that there's social issues at the heart of everything that he says. He does keep making references to particular social issues. Okay. He goes on about the girls with their counting their pennies in the back bedroom. Got that kind of thing. Talks about how many people live this kind of a life. There's a number of examples that we can go with. So what we have is that there is a bit more character to him. He's not interested in family. He has emotion. He does react emotionally all the way through. And he's very emotive as well. When he's talking about Eva, he's constantly, again, it's well worth noting, examples there for you to look at. When he talks about Eva, he's so often, they can make comment at the end, stops and starts going on about the pain she went through, the suffering. Small little thing like Sheila goes, was she pretty? Then he goes, well, she wasn't when I saw her tonight, but yes, she had been. I mean, really quite unnecessary, almost thrown in comments just to say, yeah, remember how horrible this was, how awful it was. As I say, they refer to it at the end when I think they're joking at the time, and one of them said, and I think it's Arthur who puts on his the inspector's voice, goes, "Oh, I wish you could have seen her with me tonight." And Sheila goes, "Oh, please don't." And I think Gerald goes, "Well, there you go, straight away. As soon as you do that, it gets a reaction." So they even notice that he does this. But why? Why all of these things at the centre? Is it just because Priestley isn't interested in family, doesn't like the Burlings, wants to be aggressive at us, has social issues? I don't think so. I think what it's more about, it's less about the actual vision itself. It's more about the fact that this is forceful as a play. This is something where he is not saying to us, this is for your consideration. He's saying, do this, sort this out now. And so he makes the inspector as forceful as that. So we have this vision of a new Britain represented potentially in the Inspector, and then it's pushed on us really passionately and really forcefully. Now, I'm going to focus in quite a bit on the final speech. It's a very, very important bit. It's well worth reading enough times to basically know it off by heart. Okay. But with a little closer look, I think there's certain things it reveals that again tell us something about the purpose that the inspectors come here for. Now, first of all, there are certain things up on there that again, as I say as an examiner, I see repeated over and over, often by people who don't really know why they're saying it. We are members of one body. Oh, he's referring to religion. He's referring to the communion. I doubt he is, but you know, that's your argument if you want it. But what's the point you're making? Why are you saying it? And constantly we get those same kind of things all the way through. Also get mistakes. In the first bit that I'm going to refer to here, the millions and millions of Eva Smiths and John Smiths. One year I did see someone claim through a quotation that there are millions and millions of Eva Smiths, suggests to us that she's changed her name that many times. But genuine answer there from somebody. But I think there's more going on in here. The implication of the plural here, Eva Smiths and John Smiths. Okay, yeah, okay. On an obvious level, he's saying there's lots of people here. I'm talking about a whole class. I'm not talking about a single person. Although it's interesting that Eva Smith does have a very distinct personality. She isn't just a kind of caricature of the working class. She does have something very distinct about her. But why is he so keen to say they are Eva Smiths and John Smiths? I suppose what we can argue is that he's trying to broaden this. Yes, there are individuals, and Eva Smith on her own is an individual, interesting, caring, thoughtful, moral person. And there's millions more like her. They're not the same person, but there's millions more with the same level of character. It's not just that we have a big bulk of society you're ignoring, it's that there are millions of these people. That's why he uses the names. Yeah, it may be John Smith, you know, is the standard name and whatever, but that's why he uses the names for me. And when he follows on straight afterwards by then saying they're left with us with their lives, their hopes and fears, their suffering and chance of happiness, this is a deliberate attempt, in my mind, to pull us into the individual aspects of them. That these aren't just figures that we can look at. They have individual elements to them. They have hopes. That's what he wants us to think about. Eva Smith may have suffered in her life, but she wanted something out of life. She had hopes. She wanted to achieve something. I mean, goodness me, we saw at the beginning, Arthur refers to her very clearly as a good worker, as someone who was due a promotion, someone who's coming out of it. I mean, this is somebody who is basically on the course to actually better themselves. Remember, she's mentioned as well as coming from the country, and she's come to the city. She's obviously lost her parents. There's a backstory there. He deliberately doesn't go into depth and make sure we know it, but we can speculate at it. We can think about it. And they've all got that. They've all got their hopes. They've all got their fears as well. Suggest weakness in there as a same line. They've all suffer. As well as having their hopes, they will all have these moments of suffering. It won't just be the same as yours. But to pair with suffering, they all have a chance of happiness. And it's interesting for me that he focuses in on that. It's not always a big socialist ideal, this, when you're talking about people's rights and whatever, the right for happiness. But a libertarian thing at times. It's very much at the heart, as you know, of the American Constitution, the right for happiness. But this is something he wants to get across, the idea that there are people who can be happy and they have a chance of it. And people like the Berlins take it away from them. So again, looking closely at that, once again, comes to me, it's this point that he's trying to humanize the situation. It's not that there are millions and millions of bolts of them. It's that all of these millions are individuals, are human. When he then does move on to the most quoted bit, second most quoted at least, we don't live alone. We are members of one body. We are responsible for each other. I think the key here, we've obviously got the triplet. We, right? We've obviously got very direct statements. It's obviously the climax of his speech. Yeah. It's the straightforward message of the play. Yeah, I'm not going to argue against that. This, to me, is Priestley. It's no longer the inspector in many ways. It is Priestley now literally talking to the audience. Okay. And if you don't do it well, actually, on stage, it can come over as incredibly patronizing. Because if you've been watching this play and you don't realize it's already, you're not really thinking very much, are you? So what should we notice from this? Well, first of all, I think the most important thing is that anaphora of we. That's the point he's making. And the we includes all of the Burlings and Gerald, but it also includes all of the Eva Smiths and all of the John Smiths. More than that, it includes the inspector. It's not a message of you people in the middle class need to change. It is a message that of a vision. I said at the beginning, a vision of a new Britain that he's looking at. We, everybody in the island, is a part of all of this. Now, that leads us to the final bit here. Again, another bit that's it's kind of, maybe I'd say misunderstood, but certainly not always used to the best. People love to go on about the fire and blood and anguish and go on about hell and link it back to the one blood and go on about religion. I'm not really sure there's a great deal of religion in this play. Priestley, I don't think, is particularly bothered about any religious aspects here. It's not brought in anywhere else in the play. That's always, when you're interpreting something, for me, that's always the key. Is it something that's common to the whole play? Is it something that's been going on? If it suddenly comes up at one moment, then either it's bad writing or it's not what you're thinking. No, when it comes up to this, I think this is very genuinely understood to be a reference to the world wars. Okay? And there comes the important element of it. He's not warning the audience, is he? Because this has already happened. So he's not saying to the audience, we're all one body, and if we don't change, this is what's going to happen. He's saying, we're all one body, and we didn't change. And this happened. It's already occurred. One thing that's easily forgotten about this play is it's historical. Even in the time it was written, 1946, first of all, written the end of the war, Second World War, set 30 odd years previous. I often want to talk to people about Sheila. People like to say, oh, Sheila changes. That's another thing that I would always argue about. But people like to say, oh, Sheila changes on the way across and she represents this new hope for us in the future. Well, no, she doesn't. Because by the time this is on, Sheila's the same age, slightly more really, as her mother in this play. She's in her 50s. Is she still alive? So it's failed. Whatever Sheila represented has failed. Whatever change Sheila could have brought didn't happen. And I think he's very, very aware of this. He's not presenting to us a bunch of people that we can look at, or his audience can look at and say, this is the way forward. We need to be more like Sheila. He's providing us with a sense of a generation, maybe that were failed by the older ones, that suffered because of this. This is all back in the past. There's plenty of things you can play with in your mind about this. I mean, you think about the fact it's 1912, 2 years later, the First World War broke out. What do you think happened to those characters? Play that game. You know? What do you think happened to Eric? I reckon he signed up really quickly. For you? I think he'd sign up for the First World War pretty quickly. In his class level, he'd have been almost certainly a junior officer. They're the ones in the trenches who kind of led the division there. Yeah, I'd imagine he'd have been all right at that, to be honest with you. He probably would have found his thing there. But junior officers had the highest casualty rate of anybody. Eric would be dead within a few years to the end of his play. I'm pretty sure of it. Gerald, well, he's too posh. He wouldn't be in the trenches, would he? He'd be some kind of like major behind the scenes or whatever like that, finding his way through things. But, you know, the tragedy therefore stands for Mr. and Mrs. Burling. But all this stuff about Eric, remember, he makes it very, very clear that they're very disturbed by the idea, no matter how much Arthur feels that Eric is a problem, gets annoyed with him, they are both very, very disturbed by the idea that Eric is in trouble, right, when it comes out. And they're going to lose it. So this last bit, very, very important. It has happened already. Men will be taught it in fire, blood and anguish, says the inspector, in 1912. Audience sat there, it happened. And I think that very much positions us in a particular way. Okay. First of all, the anger that I've mentioned to many of you many times before, that the audience, I'm sure, would feel at Arthur. If I haven't said it to you before, I'm going to say it again. Another thing that really gets in the way when we're marking Arthur, bloody Titanic. Oh, God. I'm not kidding. I reckon at least 80% of all Inspector Calls things I mention the bloody Titanic. I don't know why. Why are people so obsessed with the Titanic? It's a throwaway line. You know, if you want to show Arthur being an idiot, don't talk about the Titanic. Talk about the fact he thinks there won't be a war. That's going to bother people sat there. That's really going to bother them. People sat in an audience in 1946 who just lived through 6 years of hell. Every single one of them would have lost close family members, friends, all like that, all over the place. And you've got this pompous bloke going, "Oh, it won't be war." That's going to get them. Not talking about a bleeding ship that went down. And if you want another one, look at the way he says there won't be labour troubles. And the reason for there won't be labour troubles is he thinks the employers have already got together and sorted it out so that they won't have a chance to. That's worse. Anyway, coming back to the point I'm making with that, it's all about presenting Arthur as despised by the audience. And I think that's what he expects to do. He expects the audience to hate Arthur and to hate what they see with him in his generation. And here we see why. Because they are the ones in his mind who led us into the First World War, and then consequently the second afterwards. Now, suddenly the inspector goes, there is a lot of Priestley in there, of course, but he's fulfilling a much bigger role than that. Having presented that vision of society at the beginning, represented that vision of a new society, he's showing us now how that vision was rejected, how that vision was destroyed when the opportunity was there by the selfishness of people like Burling's. But because the inspector's kind of classless and kind of eternal, even though it's in the past, you get the feeling the inspector still exists. He's still there. The opportunity is still there. And that's what he's coming back to us with. We were taught that way. We were taught that way. And if we don't take the chance we've got now, it's going to happen again. So, brings me round to the idea that I started with. If he's not just a mouthpiece, what's the inspector there for? First of all, he makes it very clear that the why is more important. Not very inspector-like. He's not there to do what police inspectors do, which is establish facts. He knows the facts. He constantly says, I'm here to find out why this happened. Now that gives us a very different purpose, doesn't it? Okay? He's someone there to establish almost social cause, almost the problems in society that lead to this issue. He's there to talk about responsibility for others. The two key words in many ways of the play are responsibility and duty. They come up over and over and over again. You know, Arthur refuses, literally says, I can't take responsibility. And that's actually, if you think about it, straight after he says to the inspector, oh, yeah, there's something in what you say, when he's talking about the chain of events thing. Oh, yeah, okay, there's something in that, but I can't take any responsibility. So it kind of shows you very much his blinkered idea. And of course, we've seen the others there. Responsibility keeps coming up. Okay. Arthur didn't even understand it, to go back to him. He says, after denying any responsibility, very soon after that, he turns to Eric and says, you need to take a bit more, learn a bit more responsibility. Obviously, the irony isn't lost on us, right? So a repeated issue there. So his purpose is to remind us that that's what this play is about. But he is clearly classless. He doesn't pay any attention to class at the beginning or at any point later. When he says we are one body, he's not referring to a class, if he said a particular class, he's referring to everybody. That's why it's addressed almost as the audience. So again, his purpose is to represent that class doesn't have to be an issue. It's not just about the working class. It's about the fact there is no issue. I mean, again, if you want to make that even clearer, another great link there is, of course, to consider how Sheila and Eva are essentially the same person. Okay, just one has privilege and one doesn't. Okay, think about it. If you look at their description, their physical description, they're both referred to as pretty, same word. They're both a similar age. See, they both got Gerald in his way. So there's clear similarities there between them. Class doesn't have to be an issue, and that's one of the things she notices. And he represents a second chance, but really much more interestingly, he represents a second chance that maybe he represents a third chance. Whatever it is, the inspector has a lot more interesting about him. Yes, he's largely functional. He has a role more than a character. But there is more depth there. And Priestley is using him as much more than just a vehicle to put himself on stage. As I said to you, I think Sheila quite possibly spouts far more that comes directly from Priestley than the inspector does. So he comes into many issues. I think he's a very interesting person to use and to refer to. And I think that gives you, hopefully, something that's a little bit more insightful, a little bit more conceptual that we're looking for in terms of thinking about it. Now, my next week's one, I believe, is another Inspector Calls one in which I'm going to look at Arthur and Sybil and then the generation they belong to. But in the meantime, again, do take those sheets away with you. And